Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. We're just giving people a few minutes. We're getting some emails that there were some issues with people logging in. So just wanted to say good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever virtual camp. We know that there's some people that are still logging on, and because this was an invite-only session, probably was a little confusing with the passcodes and things, but this afternoon, the session with Cindy and Joan, you will use the same link and the same code, and I'll have that at the end of my slides just to prompt and remind you. And we appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to move some things on my screen so I can see. Perfect. I am checking your names off of my list as you guys have logged in, but I thought it would be good just to go through and introduce ourselves in just a second. If you don't know me, I'm going to be your camp counselor today. I'm Jennifer Wall, and I have the greatest job ever. I'm a program consultant for the Transition Alliance, and I promise that's what my hair looks like right now in that amazing glamour shot that you see. If you when you were in college classes, the first day that you showed up, you want to make sure that you're in the right room. And so just to make sure you're in the right place today, our session this morning will focus specifically on transition assessment. What we're going to do today is we're going to really focus on helping you train educators on how to choose appropriate transition assessments in each of the post-secondary domains. We'll take a look at all the different components and lots of different examples and have some rich discussion with you guys, because we have a really awesome group of trainers that have been invited and accepted and confirmed that they would be here to help us. And then, so I wanted to take just a second to talk about what our community practice actually will be. These are the first steps, obviously, this morning and this afternoon. We're going to form a statewide transition assessment and planning community of practice. A community of practice is a group of people that have the same passion or the same concern over something that they do. They'll interact regularly, learn from each other, and make things better for our students, our districts, our families, and transition in general. With our community of practice, we do plan to meet monthly virtually to support one another in the LEA training, coaching, and support. That doesn't mean that every month it will be Cindy, me, or one of the task team members leading each of the groups. We want to tap into all of the amazing resources that you guys have across our state and things that you're doing that can support each other. And it's not just new transition coordinators or new people that are training. These can be people that we have just joined together to support each other, because as reflective practitioners, we're always learning something every day. So Joan, Cindy, and I today plan to give you best practices, things that we know that work, things that we can help with, but in no means are we trying to say that what you are doing is not right, because we would love for you to share the things that you are doing in your districts, because tomorrow we will be training teachers and practitioners specifically. So if there's things that come up today that we talk about or we go over that you really would love for us to go deeper or to bring up in a different way, please, please, please let us know. This is the time where you're not going to be muted. You're free to talk to us. This is a collaboration, because tomorrow when we train with the teachers and things, we want to make sure that we're setting the stage for what we plan to do with this awesome work in our community of practice. So I do want to take just a minute, even though I can see your names and I know who all of you are, I just want to take a minute for you guys to introduce yourselves to each other and tell what your name is, what district that you serve, and what your role is within that district. And I know that it's going to be hard because we are virtual, but we can start at the top of the list. Oh, they're alphabetized. So Ann looks like you're first. Whoop, whoop.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Ann Fuyal, Transition Coordinator for Florence One Schools.
And you have a friend with you, someone else from Florence. Who is that?
I do. Thomas Andrews.
I don't think
our new, he's been in IEP compliance for the transition age students for about a year.
Awesome. And I don't know if he has audio. Can you have audio, Thomas? Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. Yes.
I'm Thomas Andrews, also from Florence One, and I'm the secondary compliance monitor for Florence One.
That's awesome. We're happy to have both of you from Florence One.
Thank you.
I guess I'll go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl George, Florence School District 3 Special Ed Director.
Thank you, thank you.
Good
I am
morning,
checking.
Parrish, Colleton County School District Special Education Coordinator.
Thank you.
Good morning, Engineer Bounds, Richland 1 School District Transition Consultant.
Thank you. Got you checked off.
Good morning, Shayla Wilson, Winsburg County School District Transition Specialist.
Thank you, thank you.
Good morning, Kathy Southard, Charter Institute of Erskine, Transition Coordinator.
Thank you. Got you checked off.
Good morning, Mary Stahl, Special Education Coordinator with Charleston County School District.
Perfect. And Mary, there were a few teachers that had emailed me, I think, that may have gotten the link for the train the trainer session, and I pushed them to register for tomorrow, but I did tell them to talk to you if there was any difference in that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Melissa Rozier from the School District of Oconee County, and I am the Transition Specialist.
Got you, got you.
Hey, good morning. I'm Celisa Quarles from Sumter School District, and I'm the South Carolina High School Credential Lead Teacher and have just been given the responsibility of assisting with transition in our district.
That's wonderful. You will do an awesome job in that new role. We will help you. You have an awesome team of people
Oh,
here.
yes. No doubt, no doubt.
All right, I have a Mary on the participants list that doesn't have a last name. Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Jennifer, I don't see a microphone by that person, so I don't know if they
Oh, you're right. You're right.
have to talk, but they could,
Put it in the chat.
yeah.
Oh, there are 11 things in the chat that I totally did not.
Yeah, and I will say that everybody's list doesn't look the same, so
Oh, you're right.
yeah.
All right. I don't see. I just want to make sure that I have everybody. So if there's things, okay, so you guys feel free to unmute yourselves and talk at any point in time. We're not going to have you muted like the rest of the week in the training sessions. If you attend our evidence-based practice, you will be muted for the actual session and then come back and do a Meet the Experts Q&A. But for today, please feel free to unmute yourselves, interrupt me. You know, this dialogue honestly is to support the work in our community of practice. So please feel free to share. Okay, so then I'm going to mark these names. Honestly, I just want to make sure I know who is here so that we can. All right, we got that. Perfect.
Well, I'll go ahead and say good morning. This is Tracy Hagler from Orangeburg County School District now, not District 5.
Yay.
And I work as a high school special education teacher. We do not have a lead transition person, but I guess it's kind of like me.
Well, congratulations. It's you right now, right?
I guess.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Jennifer, Misha Gordon just typed in the chat and said that she doesn't have video or audio
Okay.
and that she's from Edgefield County, serving in the capacity as career specialist.
Perfect. I have her on my list. And if she types any questions or anything in the chat, Cindy, will you just let us know?
Yes, I definitely will.
Good morning. I don't know if anybody can hear me or not.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Sam Price, and I'm with Chesterfield County School District. I'm the Transition and Work-Based Learning Coordinator.
Wonderful. Sorry, I was trying to email you from my phone this morning because I already had my computer up.
It's okay.
You're here. That's all that matters, right?
Yep.
And you know, guys, if you are working, she said she's a work-based learning coordinator, and one really awesome school-based enterprise that may come out of some of these things is making the mask to sell as a school-based enterprise or as a community involvement. She makes amazing masks. I've been seeing those on Facebook, and it made me think about, you know, some of our students learning those things as skills. So Sam's your woman if you want to learn how to do that, because I do not know how to sew. All right, so if that is everyone, or we'll go ahead and get started. These are the goals for our time together this morning. Like I said, please feel free to interrupt me, to, you know, give us your input. We have, you know, 22 transition professionals with us this morning. Purposefully, we made this a really small group. Cindy and I did not want to get above 30 people because we wanted to be able to interact. This would not be, you know, lecture based. It was, you know, let's talk about all of these components. Feel free to get up and go to the restroom, get a snack, move around as needed. I'm going to try really hard to stay seated so that all of my notes stay together. But, you know, 3 hours this morning and 3 hours this afternoon, we get it. Virtual conferencing. You know, it is our first time, and we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we get the information to you guys. And we do understand that the virtual is different. And so if you notice, if you've seen our schedule for the week for our summer camp, you'll notice the overarching theme for everything is evidence-based practices. Our team decided that we wanted to really hit heavy the evidence-based practices to support all secondary teachers. And so we reached out to experts across our state and across the nation that we know, have done a lot of research in specific content areas, and you guys are in for, it's going to be amazing. Last week, Mike and I met with all of our presenters and, did some practice sessions to make some backup plans in case we have any issues with anything. Jesus, please don't let that happen. But you guys are in for a real treat. Like, the information that is shared is going to be just amazing things that we can take back to our schools immediately and get to work with some of these things. But one of the things that we did ask all presenters to do is to make guided notes. We did not give very specific guidance on how to do the guided notes other than just, research-based strategies for note taking. And so we have modeled that strategy throughout all of our sessions by giving you guided notes for those sessions. Now, today's guided notes look a little bit different because we're going to model a little bit, but it's more about training you to train teachers. What the teachers will get tomorrow is, really specific. But basically, we wanted to practice what we preach. We want to show you how modeling these strategies of note-taking help you pay more attention to the presenter and the important information, and give you great examples of evidence-based practice note-taking strategies today. So let's just take a look at some of those things. Like I said, the difference in today and tomorrow. Today is all about how to train teachers. A lot of the information that I'm going to go over and are in these slides, you probably know and could say in your sleep. And the intention is not to tell you things that you already know. It's give you examples of way that we train teachers. A lot of the work that we've done, or at least I've been able to do with the Transition Alliance since I've worked, is to really help teachers. But we feel like a sustainable resource are you guys. You guys have, all these resources and all the knowledge to do the things in your district. And so by supporting you and supporting each other in this community of practice, we're going to be able to really help the teachers across the state by providing resources to you and our team. And I honestly want this group of 25 to 30 professionals to be very close. And when you come up with a new resource that you think is going to impact teachers and students, that you immediately think of this community of practice and want to share it. Like in our team, our task team, we have a group chat. And if we're reading something, see something on TV that would help teachers, like we're immediately all over, hey, we need to get teachers this information. We need to create this. And that's exactly what I want this community of practice to turn into. Now, the difference in tomorrow is it's going to be the same information that Cindy, Joan, and I present to teachers. The sessions are exactly the same. I'll say practitioners because we have all type of educators tomorrow, not just teachers. But the information tomorrow could be brand new. It could be the very first time that these educators are hearing about transition services. And we have people registered for our sessions all week that have never even attended a Transition Alliance sponsored event. So really excited to get that information out, especially to new teachers, especially during this time. We want to provide as much support as we possibly can. So let's just take a look take a look at what our guided notes are going to look like. Like I said, the note taking you're using today is going to be different than what I'll model tomorrow. But within the guided notes that you see that we posted, and the guided notes for today, you're going to see different things that just say trainer tips. And those are slides that we've interjected throughout the presentation today to just tell you what we would say, or a way to kind of pull things together in that specific content. So we added lines so that you could write those notes or type those notes. But the PowerPoint that we use today and the PowerPoint that we use tomorrow, you guys will have access to all of that. So you can copy, paste, cut, whatever you want and make it yours for your training. Every single link in the transition assessment PowerPoint will be a live link so that when you're using it, you can actually go to the sites and show the teachers the actual transition assessments. I did some screenshots for us today, and I used some screenshots tomorrow just so that teachers can see the examples. I know that when I was a classroom teacher, I may not have known the name of a specific transition assessment, but I knew what color it was, or I knew what the notebook looked like. So if you showed me a picture of it or something, then I may know that I'm using that. So if you look at the purpose of IDEA, that's how I would start our training. And so this is what the guided notes look like, but this is what the session would actually be. So it's just, you know, the key important points that I want people to take away from this slide, they would actually write those things down on their guided notes. So one of the things that we're going to talk about tomorrow is we're going to talk about what IDEA 2004 is, you know, section 300.43 is the one that we call transition services. I think it's really cool to teach people that, you know, what this bill is all about, because you know, the proposal that went before Congress gave us very specific rights for individuals with disabilities. And, you know, we talk about Public Law 94-142 all the time, and we just spit that number out like it's, you know, our phone number. But there's people that don't know that PL stands for public law, and that 94 stands for the 94th Congress that passed the 142nd law of 1975. So I think a lot of that information is really cool to tell, you know, our teachers. And especially right now, actually this week is the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, probably one of the most important and comprehensive pieces of legislation that ever went through to give rights to individuals with disabilities, that was signed in 1990. So how cool is that, that this Saturday is the actual anniversary? So if you were on social media, you know, really tag the ADA 30 or do something exciting. I know where I live, we are showing a movie and having like a disability pride activity that's sponsored by ADA 30. And so I know that with social distancing, a lot of people are doing these things at like drive-in movies and places that, you know, things like that. But so that's a really cool thing to celebrate in our field. And, you know, this is also a really cool thing to teach our students about self-determination and self-advocacy, because these are very important pieces of our history. Okay, so getting back to IDEA, see how I've underlined specific words to show important points. The age of 13, super important, because if we have people that are moving from another state that are teachers or educators, you know, some places this is 16, some places this is 14. And so we want to make sure that in South Carolina, they understand, very specific things here. So age appropriate, we'll talk about that in just a second. And then of course, transition services. And then the whole theme of today and this afternoon and all of tomorrow is really having the elements of transition-rich IEPs. We purposefully are spending the entire morning on transition assessment and the rest of the afternoon in taking the transition assessment and using that to write the post-secondary goals that are measurable, the activities and services, and the measurable annual IE goals, because you cannot do any of the components of your IEP until you've done transition assessment. Transition assessment has to be first. Your IEP is written based on the data that you collect in the transition assessment, and we want our teachers to realize how valuable and important the time spent in transition assessment is. And the most important component of all of this is in red. I had a professor in 1995, I don't know what year, I'm not that old, a professor at UNC Charlotte that said if it's written in red, he would jump up and down. And so on his overhead projector with his pen, he would write it in red, and we knew that meant it was going to be on the test. So if it's written in red, do what he said. And so student-centered, why is this important? And so the data that's on your screen, we will definitely go over with teachers tomorrow. But please, 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 if you have in your schedule and you have time to go to the evidence-based practices session on self-determination on Thursday afternoon, Dr. Margot Izzo from Ohio State is going to do a session. It's a very specific to evidence-based practices on self-determination. She is a person with a disability herself. She talks about disclosure. She talks about her own experiences. It's super powerful for teachers to hear a lot of the strategies that have helped her along the way. And I really, really, really look forward to that session. And if you're unable to come to that session, all of our sessions are going to be recorded and put onto our website so that you, and as a trainer, you will have access, well, everyone will, but as a trainer, you will have access to all of these sessions so that as you're working with folks in your district and you hear that they're really focused on evidence-based practices and organizational skills, or they need help with some math strategies, you can come back to these sessions. They're each going to be 1 hour, and you can share that with your teachers and staff who may need that specific training that weren't able to make it this summer. And so when I go over this slide, the last slide the last slide at the bottom where it talks about the research on student-centered and self-determination, why it's so important, not just that it's the law, but fewer behavior problems. I underline it, and this cute little boy who we've never seen a student make that face ever, that comes flying in for the teachers, because that last point should motivate us in and of itself, because as classroom teachers, we want to make sure that our students, have fewer behavior problems, have positive school experience. And just by focusing on self-determination, the research shows that that can help us do those things. So trainer tip here, it says, did you see how my guided notes made you focus on the important components of the slides? Your audience will listen and be more focused on the important components using evidence-based practices for note-taking. So did you guys use guided notes at all in any other trainings that you've been in? Has anyone had experience doing that with training other than college classes?
Good morning again. This is Tracy. We use guided notes for just teaching, not for training, teacher training, but as a part of AVID, we've made the kids use it, and we try to use it even in special ed resource, try to make kids use the guided notes to help them.
That's a perfect example, Tracy. Yeah, and one of my jobs when I taught high school is I would collaborate with a civics teacher, Mr. Powers. And so we had specific students that I had to create guided notes for so that they were able to, you know, access the information. Well, he learned quickly that those guided notes worked for all students, not just the kids with IEPs. And so I guarantee if we call him right now, you know, 17 years later, he is still using guided notes in gen ed classrooms for all students. And it just happens to be an accommodation that works, you know, for all kids, not just the kids with disabilities. And you'll see your students' grades do go up whenever you use evidence-based practices. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about how we would start our training. So if we're training teachers on transition assessment, this stuff can get kind of boring. You know, talking about IDEA can get boring. The teachers, you know, sometimes it's overload. They know that they had to come to this training. So, you know, we can start with, you know, this slide specifically says, what did you want to be when you grew up? Okay, well, maybe some of us in the, some of our participants said they wanted to be in education when they were young, but probably at least half of us had a different, you know, goal. And so as the trainer, you would want to, you know, I sometimes use the example of myself when, you know, I was in middle school, I really, really liked my hair to be different colors. And I thought I was going to be a punk rock singer. And really, I thought I should be Cyndi Lauper, let's be honest. And so if anyone's ever gone to sing karaoke with me, and there's a few of you who probably have heard me sing, I am not a good singer. It took my, a person that's friends with my grandmother at my church to tell me that it would be better if I would lip sing during the church Christmas play because of how bad I sing. And I just believed that the louder I sang, it was, you could hear me clearly. And you think that I'm trying to make a joke right now, but I'm being dead serious, that I believe that my voice was, I mean, I sound super Southern, and I still believe I sound like Carrie Underwood, but no one's paying me to sing right now. So, and then another thing that I wanted to be when I grew up is I wanted to be a personal shopper. I like to spend money, so somebody should pay me to shop. Well, you know, neither of those things are things that I was able to do. So that's a great way to start your session. It's a great way to set the stage, because you're going to go back to the idea that, okay, Jennifer wasn't a very good singer. And how did she learn she wasn't a good singer? How did she make her backup plan? Another activity that I do to set the stage whenever we are doing these sessions in person, especially when I come into districts and I meet teachers that I don't know. I know most of you, and we work together in conferences, but when you go into the trainings with teachers, I don't know a lot of them. So I'll give them 2 sticky notes or name tags, and I ask them to tell me, you know, adjectives to describe themselves, something they're really good at and something they're not so good at. And then I use that throughout the training. For example, the thing that they're good at, I use that as informal data collection of something they're good at. And I use that throughout my training, and I can see it on their shirts. And so something that I actually wrote on my note, great singer Jennifer and bad driver Jennifer, because I am not a great driver. And I get distracted. So I have a thing on my radio through Apple CarPlay that turns my phone off and all things technology, so that when I'm driving, I stay focused. Between the ages of like 18 and 30, if I told you how many speeding tickets I was in, you would be thankful that you didn't pay my insurance. But so my shirt, I would have bad driver Jennifer, good singer Jennifer, something like that. Well, I would go back to those things throughout the training and say, okay, everybody who said they were a procrastinator, I need you to sit at this table. We're going to identify this table by our procrastinators. And so see how that can be filtered in throughout our transition training just by doing, you know, a simple icebreaker. So on your notes right now, you have a place that you can put some ideas for icebreakers. So I would love it if we could take a few minutes and you guys just tell us some ways that you set the stage in any kind of training that you do.
Hi, this is Anjanita. What I've done sometimes is I will either have M&Ms or either color folders, but I usually use the M&Ms. And based on the color, they will have a question they will have to answer based on the color of M&M that they picked.
I love that. So one teacher shared with us that the first, and this was not at a training with teachers, this is in her specific classroom. She would have toilet paper, and she passed around the roll of toilet paper and just told the students on the first day, she would say, take some toilet paper, but didn't give specific directions, and then pass it to your neighbor. So of course you have students who, you know, I can picture my son rolling it around his hand to make sure he got a whole lot, and then passing it to the next person. Well, then when it gets to the end of the students, they have to count how many slips of toilet paper they have, and that's how many facts about themselves they have to tell the class on the first day of school. So I thought that was a really cool way to, well, to teach a lot of things, but, you know, to really do an icebreaker for teachers is something similar like that, and then have them share, you know, because really good data comes from students when they share things and they think they're sharing to their peers, not necessarily just to their teachers. So I think that was an awesome idea too. And it doesn't actually have to relate to transition assessment. When you do an icebreaker, it's really just to do just that, break the ice. You know, like the beginning of every training, you know, you're setting the stage of how this day is going to go. And I really love the M&M idea because, you know, everybody wants a snack. Chocolate's the best. And then you're also giving them a job based on those. And there's an evidence-based practice that's called wait time. And when you ask a question to your class, it should not be a yes or no, or does that make sense? It should be something that has a specific answer. And research shows that the more wait time that you give, the students feel the pressure to answer. So even today in our virtual conference, when we ask questions, we will have wait time because you guys may not want to share. You may still be eating your breakfast. But honestly, you have the most valuable resources when it comes to these things with each other. And so there's only, you know, 20 something of us. So please feel free to jump in at any time. I really, really, really encourage it because you guys are awesome. That's why we want you to as part of this team. So I do appreciate anything that you guys are sharing with us. Anybody else? Great icebreakers?
Jennifer, this is something that I used to use when I did career counseling lessons in the classroom with students, but I've also used it with some teachers before. I purchased this thing, and I'm sure you can probably still get them online, called a thumb ball. And it is just a round, soft ball that has different hexagon prints, almost like a soccer ball all around it. And every different hexagon has a question in it. So you just toss the ball around the room, and whatever your thumb lands on is the question that you have to answer.
I love it. And I'm sure that us Dollar Tree people can remember when Pinterest came out with the beach ball, and the beach ball is different colors. So you do the exact same thing and you write the question. Like on the red one is, you know, an independent living question. The green one was an employment question. And so we would have to write those. So wherever your thumb landed when the beach ball was caught, you could ask, but you know, with the hexagon, there was probably a lot more questions on there. But if you wanted to make it yourself, the beach ball, you know, it went by the color, or you could write something on there. I mean, I love that. And the students get up and they're throwing the ball around. So immediately it's a fun activity, and it allows them to talk about themselves and do those things in an environment that they're not just sitting at their desk too.
Hi, this is Cheryl. I think responding to Deanna's question, one of the icebreakers we can do if it's virtual could be something like 2 truths and a lie, where the kids still get to kind of talk about themselves and be creative with the lie that they're telling.
I absolutely love that. Yes, virtual, beautiful. Wait, the 2 truths and a lie, and getting them, and as the teacher, you know, modeling that with, you know, something really crazy. And I used to do the 2 truths and a lie and say, I've visited 47 states. I've jumped out of an airplane twice, and I love to cut grass. Well, the lie is that I love to cut grass. I'm in my 40s. I've never cut grass in my life. So it would be funny for the students because I jumped out of an airplane on my dad's 60th birthday and on my 21st birthday. So I obviously have pictures of that fun stuff. And so it's a great icebreaker. And then to do it electronically, you could use Padlet or any of those amazing resources that we have online, but it's still informal data that you're collecting. And I've said this for years, things that you get your students to post on social media are the real deal. Like if they are putting it out there for their friends, their family, whomever is in the TikTok world and all of those things, if your student's putting it out there, then there's I'm not saying it's completely true, but there's some truth behind that data. So if you're asking them to put something in a Padlet or create something that has a goal in mind, that information that they're using really has some information that we can look at. So those are great questions and great ideas. So one of the things that I was going to do is I would model how I would set the stage tomorrow with our teachers and educators. I'll ask them what they wanted to be when they grew up, and we are going to be muted for most of the session tomorrow. So I'm going to just let them sit and think about it. And so I'm going to say, well, how about these? Did you think that you were going to live in poverty? Did you think about earning $7, $8 an hour for the rest of your adulthood? What about going to school in prison? Have you ever thought about that? How about if you need to go to the doctor? Did you think about not having health insurance? Do you want social services to check up on you for the rest of your life? Call you weekly, call the school weekly, check to make sure that there's food in your house, make sure that you're safe. What about homeless? Did you think about being homeless? So data shows that, and then I would read what's on the screen. Obviously, the outcomes of individuals with disabilities have gotten better since 1975, and even better since 2004 with the laws that we have and the things that have come about, but it's still not great. Throughout adulthood, 82% will continue to work in a permanent paid job as a person without a disability, but only 30% with a disability will continue to work in that permanent paid job. That's terrible. So as educators, what can we do? And this is where, what are things, and as trainers and as people that are going to motivate our teachers to make changes and big impacts in that area, what are things that we can do?
Well, I think one of the first things we can do is to definitely identify those evidence-based practices such as teaching self-determination, connecting kids to CTE courses, student-led IEPs to hopefully change that direction.
Absolutely. And so within your presentations, when you're training teachers, you want to have guiding questions and leading questions just like this one. What can educators do? And if there's a specific answer that I want to get from my audience, so for example, tomorrow, whenever I ask this question, what can educators do? The things that I'm going to say are, we need to make sure our students have free, appropriate public education. They have individualized education programs. They're in the least restrictive environment. We have parent participation. We're doing appropriate evaluations. We're doing the things that IDEA says are the guiding principles to make sure that our students transition into adulthood. And we want to make sure that the principles of the services that we give to our transition services are results-oriented, student-centered, and a coordinated effort. And just like Cheryl said, we want the student-centered to be one of the most important components. So where does all this start? All of this starts with transition assessment. And so think of all the things that we've done to set the stage to now we're going to talk about what is transition assessment. So these slides are things that you are more than welcome to use. It is literally definition. And then I say, you know, the definition is not defined by the law, but transition, the DCDT approved a specific component. And so then by the time we get through those slides, are you confused yet? Because the law doesn't define transition assessment, DCDT does. Well, so we have teachers, are we sure they know what DCDT or who DCDT are? What about CEC? I know we do a great job in South Carolina of getting our transition teachers and teachers in general involved in CEC and DCDT. Do they know that that connects to the national level and how, you know, CEC is our professional network. DCDT is specific to career development and transition. So, you know, making sure, especially new teachers, because when you're in college, there are colleges that do a great job at having students be involved with these, you know, DCDT and CEC, but then there's colleges that may not, and the chapters may not be as big as other universities or schools, or we may have teachers coming from other states that don't even have local DCDT chapters. So as transitional professionals, it is right now they can sign up for a lot of things for free, but you know, your first year teaching, your first year as a young professional, first time into the career, there's so many resources out there by being involved in these organizations that we want to make sure we're helping our teachers and educators connect into those resources. So honestly, this is where I focus. My definition is on the law and DCDT definition together. The two most important things that I believe that come out of these are age appropriate and ongoing process. We talk about age appropriate for a few minutes because of the importance of it is the student's chronological age, not the developmental age of the student. And I know that some of you may love SpongeBob and you're going to be unhappy with my SpongeBob picture, but you know, guys, these are high school students. They shouldn't be carrying around papers that have Care Bears on them. And I realize that their reading level may be you know, lower than other students at their age, but we already, you know, we don't want our students to, you know, do things that are not age appropriate, and we definitely don't want to create activities that are not age appropriate. And unfortunately, there are still resources out there for transition assessment and other, you know, transition related tasks that are not age appropriate. And it doesn't mean that those were developed incorrectly. It just means that back when we first started developing transition assessment, you know, that's what was developed. But it is completely fine that you take something and you change it. I'm going to show you guys an example today of, you know, the non-reading interest inventory has pictures of things that, you know, in the 80s we probably did use. In the 90s we probably did use in specific job skills. But in 2020, our students don't even know what a cord is for a phone. So, you know, some of these skills that we're trying to use using resources that are dated, not only are they not age appropriate, they're not appropriate for our time. In an ongoing process, I think this is a great place to have conversations with what is an ongoing process and come up with something in your training that's an ongoing process that's not education. What's something in your personal life or your parenting? Yeah, parenting is ongoing, but something that is very specific that you give a personal example about. You know, an ongoing process of, you know, I'm trying to do this and how much work and how I always revisit and evaluate. And I think that's good when you're doing a training, is to show that an ongoing process is not once a year when the IEP is due. You know, an ongoing process is that constant evaluation. When we were planning for this specific session, I really wanted to, you know, cite researchers and give examples of things for you guys to use with our teachers. And so this specific this specific journal article, all three of these people are South Carolina researchers. Some of you probably know them and have been to sessions for them, but not only is that important that they're from our state, but it's also important that OSIS has done a lot of different trainings with us over the last few years, especially the research to practice, the symposium and those type things, when we focus on some transition assessments. And do not use, you know, do not solely use informal assessments, and making sure that you use multiple assessments across transition domains has been a a factor. Melissa, you presented with us last summer, and we talked about how important it was to do multiple transition assessments. And so it's good to show teachers that this is a national research article written by South Carolina professors, but our Department of Ed says that you need transition assessment that go across the domains and not to just use informal assessments, and to maximize student participation in the transition planning process. And you guys may have a system in your district. I know that we've helped people across the state develop packets for middle school, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. So if you're in this specific grade, here are a plethora of transition assessments that you can choose from. And then 9th grade, 10th, and they decided to do it in that way so that by the time the student transitions through all those years of school, they've used a lot of different assessments to get a lot of different needs assessed for the student's transition component. And the student isn't doing the Brigance every year, and they're not doing the YES inventory, or every single year it's the same thing and the data look different. And so if we were doing this face to face, you guys will have this QR code and you'll have this link. If you actually can use the QR code if you have your phone to go to it, or you can click on the link. And so face-to-face training, this obviously works better, but I wanted to still use it today and tomorrow because it's quick and easy to talk through. So if you Google transition assessment and you look through what I'm meant to do or what my destiny is, I love all those words. So this is one that comes up, and here are the questions. Do you want to be in charge of others? Here's the answers that I put. So do you want to be in charge of others? I put yes. If you lived in my house, I'm bossy. If you were to buy something with my holiday bonus, everyone knows, if you know me, that it would be shoes. The day that I happened to fill this out, I had done this PowerPoint maybe 67 times, and I was going through different things and probably driving the task team crazy. So they would say I'm a perfectionist. I'm not a dog or cat person, so turtle was the only option. I forgot to tell you that this was a multiple choice transition assessment. Where would you prefer to work? Home. Who would you like to work with? Gordon Ramsay. Who wouldn't? Pick a book series. And then the most important thing, if I was getting a new office, or I was getting an office, would be a new chair. Because I think that your chair is like, you're sitting and you're working, so it's important. So that's the answers that I put into the transition assessment. So if you downloaded the PowerPoint, you already know what my job were to be. But based on this data, my results are that I'm going to be a chef. So it says I'm creative, patient, and meticulous. And the last sentence is the one that I really want to focus on. You were meant to turn basic things into great art. So tomorrow when the teachers and I go through this, I have a picture of something that I tried to attempt with Pinterest, and it has the picture of what it should look like in Pinterest and then the actual creation that I made. And while I may be creative in my mind and I come up with ideas that I think would be awesome for others to make, I cannot turn anything into great art. So let's just say that the teacher used this assessment on me and then decided to add a few more questions in, what training or school do I need to get that job? I could talk about what I needed to do to be in culinary arts. I could talk about, what school was needed for that. But basically, this is not a valid transition assessment on me, because why would it say that I want to be a chef? So the two things that I think that may have led to that would be the Gordon Ramsay, because he's, a TV chef. And honestly, the skills that I like about Gordon Ramsay is that he's blunt, he's honest, and he's a perfectionist. So I would love to work with him because I think that I would work well with somebody that, was blunt and honest like him. Well, then my son pointed out that the name of the book series is The Hunger Games. So maybe the word hunger was part of the algorithm that sent me to this specific assessment leading to be chef. So the purpose of this entire activity that you could do with your staff or your students is to lead to this. Are we done? Does this constitute a transition assessment? And here I put this as a great guiding and leading question, because you will probably have teachers that Google transition assessment, find something that's quick and easy like the one we just did, and there's a ton of resources that came out of that. So once you decide that I want to be a chef, then there are specific resources, modules for me to do about being a chef that leads you. But if you were writing my post-secondary goal based on that one informal, transition assessment, it wouldn't be valid. And so that's why whenever we get to, we're still setting the stage for transition assessment. We've defined transition assessment. And so then we want to talk about what the transition assessment results should do. And the things that are on your screen all come from the DCDT fact sheet. So the results of transition assessment should help us write the goals, help us make decisions. These are data-based decisions we are making based on transition assessment, valid, reliable transition assessment. We want to learn about the students. We want to learn about their strengths outside of just academics and careers. We want to help them make a connection between what program they're currently in and making that connection to their post-school ambitions. And so, like I said, that comes from the evidence-based practice fact sheet on transition assessment developed by DCDT. I go through those components with the teachers, and I even go through a strategy that's called assess, plan, instruct, evaluate, that there's two different ways to conduct transition assessments based on this fact sheet. And so we go through very specifically, the steps of assess, plan, instruct, and evaluate. And I go into a little more detail than these 4 points that are on the screen. But if you come to the evidence-based practice sessions throughout the week, using acronyms is a way to help us remember things. It is an evidence-based practice for other components of content areas. But I point out to the teachers that it helps me remember API. And so, that's the way that you remember that you are going to assess, plan, instruct, and evaluate. Obviously, evaluate being, the most important part. And then, we get through that part of our session tomorrow, and then we talk about the 9 ideas. And those are the methods of transition assessment. And so if you've never seen those, there we go again. It's still on the evidence-based practice DCDT fact sheet. And so very clearly, all 9 of these methods, we go through them. The first original research was 97, and then the National Transition Center did it again, did more research in 2013 on this, and how to select instruments. Now, I know for you as our trainers, it seems like I just flipped through a whole bunch of slides. But basically, I just wanted to show you that all of that information that I'm going to use tomorrow to talk about choosing transition assessment, the ideas behind the methods of transition assessment, and what does my process even look like, is based on data. Every single thing that we are saying to teachers about transition assessment comes from data. And then right here where it sets the stage of age-appropriate transition assessment in the Indicator 13 checklist, this afternoon when you guys are with Cindy and Joan, what they are working on is teaching you and helping you with that transition, with that Indicator 13 checklist, and how you get all of those components in that meaningful IEP. That's why their session is called Putting the Meaning in Meaningful IEPs, because it's all defined and all based on transition assessment. But as the trainer, you guys, when we go into these sessions, being mindful of how we are designing the research. I could make a pretty slide that comes up with, where are you going? How are you going to get there? All of those things that we forever have said within transition. But if I can't find, or I haven't derived that slide or that information from an evidence-based practice or research or some personal experience of my own, then it's not an evidence-based practice. I'm not teaching teachers to use an evidence-based practice. So be mindful when you're going through these. Please use these slides. Obviously, you can change anything that you want to when you're going through this. You may have a specific teacher that really is struggling with the data must be synthesized for students with disabilities, families, and transition team members. And they really need help with that, family involvement part. So this is the only slide that you focus on for that specific support for the teachers, but you're at least embedding and building your training around data and making database decisions. And so, of course, this fact sheet's available on our website, NTAC's website, and DCDT websites. If you've never used any of the fact sheets, there's a lot of really great ones. I know the work-based learning one and community involvement is one that has really been hit heavily lately just because of our virtual learning world that we're trying to create with some community supports. And there's some examples of things that, we're trying to do to get some career interest and things. But, I think that that's probably going to be an area that our community of practice dives into in the fall. We're going to try to come up with monthly themes of things that we want to, everybody bring a resource on blank and kind of share that, and then do a poll of, what are things we're struggling with or things we want to share, and then identify specific, people to help us within our community of practice. And I feel certain that that work-based learning component and the community involvement is going to be something that we really, we're going to have to spend some time helping each other with some resources, but starting with things that are already out there. And so that's a great place to start with teachers, is with transition assessments. And while transition assessments have been around, in the beginning of transition assessments, we did have to pay a lot of money to get transition assessments. It was really difficult. We had to get, I don't know if y'all remember the catalog that came to your classroom. You had to look through it. Your SPED director, if it was Cindy Nixon, probably made you find research to make sure that it was an evidence-based practice or it had some form of support before she would purchase it. But now we are not in a shortage of transition assessments. Sadly, we are in a place where they're not based on evidence-based practice or research. They're just thrown together and sold to us. You're going to hear about an evidence-based practice to teach writing tomorrow from an amazing professor at Francis Marion. She is talking about and some of you guys probably use these with your students. I know that I used it with my daughter, but whenever you are writing or you're trying to do comprehension things, do you guys remember the phones that you would put up to your ear and your mouth and you would whisper into it and you were the one that could hear it, but no one else in the classroom could? It was made out of a PVC pipe. Somebody please say you remember that. Yes, someone used. If you have not, then that makes me even more excited. Yes, I'm getting yeses. Woohoo! So tomorrow, when you get to that session, you're going to learn. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy those for like 57 cents and put them together yourself. However, there are people that market them for $16, and they're a little bit prettier than the PVC pipe, but you can order them and they'll be shipped to you. And you just spend a lot of money on something that you could have made at Home Depot. And either of the two still do the same thing. And that's the same with transition assessments. They have packaged things really pretty to make you pay high dollar for them, but you've got to look for that research, or you've got to look for the validity. And that's why we have to make sure that our teachers understand the differences in informal and formal. We want our teachers to understand the difference in the data that they get from these. And we want to spend a lot of time on this. You will thank yourself later if you put a lot of time in training specifically on formal and informal and how to use the data, how to choose and select those instruments. You will be so thankful that you did. Okay, so before we really dive into some examples, because I have a million slides of a million different ones that I'm hoping that you guys have experience with, or that we can at least talk through and give some pros and cons. But before we get started on that part, is there anything that, like tomorrow during our training with the educators, is there any specific, and right now you may not have an answer, and that's okay, because I wrote it a couple different times in your guided notes, so that when we come back at the end, one of the last things we're going to do is we're going to talk about what you would like for Cindy and I and Joan to make sure that we do cover tomorrow. So, but before we start now, are there any specific transition assessments that you just think are the greatest, just like the greatest transition assessment your life would change if it went away, and that you feel like we really need to spend some time talking about it tomorrow? All right, so I'm here, what I'm hearing or not hearing is right now, there's not one, but we're going to definitely talk about, okay, so Sam put in the chat that there are whisper phones that are made now with a student with a disability, and they're sold. So see, that's a good use of your money. If you want to buy the phone, buy it from a person, a student with a disability that made that. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll move on, but I will expect you guys to help me out with some of these assessments because I know that you're using them. So formal assessments, as we know, we'll talk tomorrow. They're standardized instruments that have been tested. They have data that shows the reliability and validity and measures the support that they use. So basically there's a process. So the process helps us with scoring and interpreting all of these results. And so then, of course, we're going to go over advantages and disadvantages of these type of transition assessments. You know, students, you know, really enjoy doing some of these formal assessments. Some disadvantages, it's a lot of time to do these. You know, there's a lot of resources that have to be collected to actually do some of these formal assessments. They do cost. Some of the good ones are really expensive, and you may not have them available specifically at your school, or you may share one across your district. And then some of them may even be specific to a qualification. Like you could have to have specific training to do that actual transition assessment. So then informal, which is what we tend to collect the most data, but you know, we talked earlier that we want to make sure that our goals are not written specifically just on, and we're not using just informal assessments. But one of the reasons that, you know, teachers and educators use these is because, you know, they are sometimes free, sometimes they're really easy. The information comes quickly. Well, you got to remember that transition assessment that we just did on me, those questions were basically about a work environment, some of my likes, and then somehow we generated a job based on that. So we want to make sure that we go way beyond some of those things. And then, so some disadvantages for informal assessments is it may be time consuming to set up things called tryouts. And we're going to talk about what a job tryout is and how we do some data collections. And then I'm sure that you guys can come up with lots of jobs that you can't be tried out. You know, a therapist can't really go hang out in a whole lot of psychologists' offices and listen to other people talk about, you know, their lives. And so I remember vividly one time I decided that I was going to go talk to the local animal hospital where I was a teacher to see if I could get some of my students in to help do some, you know, work-based learning, job tryouts, those type things. And so Teresa, Dr. Browning, she was, you know, her daughter and my daughter danced together. I knew her really well, which probably is why she invited me to just come into the room where she was doing a surgery on a cat where the cat could no longer have babies. And I'm going to tell you that the smell of that room almost made me die. Like it overwhelmed me, like just the way that the room smelled. And I know that it had to do with like the materials, the medicine, it was super sterile, all of those things, but she was just used to it. The techs, they were just used to the smell of like, you know, doing surgery on a cat. And I'm sure doing surgery on a person doesn't smell good either, but, you know, and so I decided right then that this was not going to be a tryout for my students. My students could come in and help with the grooming side. My students could come out and learn things from them. But, you know, some of those jobs, well, and especially now, there's probably very specific rules where students couldn't do some of those things. But, you know, some of the information that we get from informal assessments can be narrow and only the student's limited experience. And I think that it's very clearly our jobs to make sure that our students widen that, but not just widen it for their dreams, but also think about where they're going to live. And what experiences they will want within our state or within, outside of our state, where they plan to go. So what I wanted to do now is just really look at some examples of formal and informal assessments and talk through these. I have examples of, lots of different things that, are good examples, things for you to do with teachers. We're going to go over, a little game. If this, when we were originally planning this session, we were so excited to do transition assessment bingo. We were going to have you guys go into different rooms and collect assessments on different areas of independent living or employment, and then based on those activities you would come back and earn a stamp. At one point in time I was even trying to get a stamp made that said task, so that you would get a specific stamp, like a blotter for bingo. And then so you can take this into your district and make it into a training just like that. Hopefully whenever we are able to do face-to-face things like that with your teachers, we'll be able to help you form something. So if your mascot is the wildcat, then you can use the wildcat as your stamp. And I know that sounds silly, but turn it into a game, and making sure that at the end, when the teacher does get the bingo, then they get to pick something, an assessment, chocolate, something to take with them. All of that's part of the stage of your training. So formal achievement tests, a lot of times these are done by diagnosticians or others within our school districts that are trained to administer some of these tests. Sometimes it is, people within your offices that do the achievement tests, and a lot of times all students are given some of the same achievement tests. It's important to realize that we can use data from all of these assessments that have been collected with our students. Now, we're going to talk through the Brigance. We're going to talk about independent living skills. We're going to talk about, the Vineland. But, if something comes up on the screen and it's something that you have either used or, want to use, like, let's talk about it, and you can give examples to each other. I really love the Brigance Life Skills Inventory. It's called the Transition Skills Inventory, the blue notebook. If you guys have used that, that is used for all types of pre-employment, career awareness, job seeking. It goes into functional reading, math, money, finance, technology, housing, food, health, travel, community resources. Like, all of that is just within the Brigance. And it really helps you focus on a lot of those, adaptive behavior, independent living skills and assessments, but it is time consuming. It's a lot of work to get all of that data and to get the scores, and it's expensive to purchase the entire Brigance. And so, there could be others that you guys use. That one pretty much, I think it's been around, and there's a lot of validity and research behind that one. So here are some specific aptitude tests. I have a comic that I sometimes share with students or even with teachers that's about aptitude tests, and it's a picture of like a professor and a student, and it says, the results of your aptitude test cannot identify a particular area that you are well suited for, but one thing is for sure, it's not test taking. And so while that's funny, it's still, a segue to help students or help teachers think about, okay, well, obviously, we're going to want to come up with a way to help our students. Now, Ability Profiler. Has anybody ever used ONET Ability Profiler? Now, the Ability Profiler is not the career interest inventory that's online. ONET Ability Profiler had the pegboard and the washers and the screws. I mean, it's still a valid resource. I just wondered if anybody currently uses it. Kathy Southard said she loves Casey Life Skills. Yes, Casey Life Skills Ansel Casey is who publishes that, and they have developed that from, I remember when we used to call that the dream sheet a long time ago, but now they've developed it into a resource that stores your data online. The identifier can be anything besides the student's name or number. It shows you what your students are common across areas, helps teachers plan their lesson plans based on the data just from Casey Life Skills. I agree with you, Kathy, that has become a really great resource. Okay, what about SAM, the skills assessment module? Has anybody used that?
This is Ann, Phil, y'all. We've used that in the past. We started out using it with students around the 10th and 11th grade, but we went back, and last year I believe we did the 9th grade. So we would kind of know where they were headed and what skills, making sure we knew what they needed to be working on toward what they wanted to do.
I agree.
We didn't use it this year because we usually do it in the spring. So,
well, and SAM is a hard one to even remotely make virtual. You know, if you were going to try to make something into it, that's a hard one. I mean, even though like,
it's very time consuming.
Yes. I think it takes about 3 hours just to administer any part, because you have the score, the profile, and then it gives you the correlations in between them. And so there's all these really specific skills if you've never used this module. And so you could be teaching students how to sort mail, how to alphabetize, and then you would want to look at like their clerical skills, their motor coordination, can they follow written instruction? It comes down to even like fine finger dexterity, measurements, like all of these like perception things based on spatial reasoning, form reasoning, color discrimination. So like if you're sorting mail, can the student alphabetize? And then for motor coordination, there's a little thing, you can see it in this picture, the Etch-a-Sketch. So then they have a specific thing they have to do within that module, and that's checking their motor coordination. And then, so then you're going to do this activity with numbers and clerical that gets you in like a payroll kind of module. And then there's like memos. The students have to deal with small parts. They have to read a ruler. They have to put things together with pipes. Then there's like these little rings they use, and then insert it with the color. So then by the time you get to the end, you have the profile and the correlation for all of these. And it's very, very hands-on. That's why a lot of the students really like it. The ONET Ability Profiler is very similar in the way that it does a lot of different skills in different ways, like the washer. And there's actually the thing that I guess I appreciated about that one as a teacher is if you're left-handed versus right-handed, the tests are scored appropriately because of the way that the board and the washer, I have 2 left-handed children, so I understood the difference in those, because there are such things as left-handed scissors, even though a lot of times people didn't believe that thing was made. So if you're assessing a student on a specific skill with right-handed scissors and they're left-handed, well, you're automatically not going to get the correct data. And so, I mean, my children are I have 2 very left-handed children. Like they are not able to, I mean, my son is not able to use his right hand for many things, but like the ability profiler takes a lot of those things into account. If you've never used ONET, now you've probably used ONET for some resources that we'll get to when we get to career interest inventory, but an aptitude test, if you're working with students that may be on the South Carolina credential or working towards different standards within like students with more significant disabilities, and you want to develop like a hands-on transition assessment and you don't already use FISH, like ONET Ability Profiler is something that you could start with. And then if you're working with students, that have, that are not on the credential, that are on the high school diploma track, there's components of all of these for students with high and low incidence disabilities. We try not to say, use this one in this population, use this one with this population, but if research shows that it's better to use with a specific population, we do want you to know that so that you don't spend your time building your transition battery resources and see that it's for the wrong population. So this is probably where we have spent a lot of our time as teachers, is on interest inventories. So the reading free interest inventory, There is the ONET career interest inventory. I'll show you. We're going to talk about that one in just a second, because I feel like that's something that a lot of teachers have used. FISH, I'm pretty sure that's something that I've seen a lot. It's Functional Independent Skills Handbook is what that's called. It's assessment, and it's actually a full curriculum for students with developmental disabilities. And so whenever you do the entire assessment, which it is time consuming too, your summary, you come out with your adaptive behavior, your cognitive skills, and then vocational skills is probably, the one that I like the most, but it's just because there's so many components. So if you guys use Teacher Paid Teachers, and I don't know if you go into any of those resources, but there's vocational kits that teachers have put together to make, so you can see if students are able to put together specific things and what their time is and all of that. So those vocational boxes, are great tools to collect data on for things like functional independence and, interest inventories. But within FISH, it gives you basically a shopping list of things that you have to purchase to be able to facilitate all the vocational things that you do. And that's published in Kansas. And so whenever you get this PowerPoint from the website, the teacher version, the one that we'll have for tomorrow, all of these will have the live links on there. So if it's something that you have never heard of, but you're super interested in, or honestly, I'd be glad to help you come up with these ideas and where to purchase some of the things, because I really see the value in those. Something that's very, very important with interest inventories is it's super fun to do some of these things. The FISH is fun. ONET career interest inventory, 60 questions. It's online. I'm going to show you guys a screenshot of that in just a second. It's really fun to make picture interest career surveys. It's really fun to update them. I made a picture schedule not that long ago for this PowerPoint that I'm going to show you. That stuff is a lot of fun to make and to implement with the students. But what's the output? What is the output of an interest inventory? That is so important. It's written in red, jump up and down. What is it that we want to make sure that the data that come out of an interest inventory has to be skill-based information that we use for goal development. It cannot be, the output has to be skill-based information for goal development. And that's something that this afternoon, when Joan and Cindy are talking about, writing very specific things within components of the IEP, you have to have skill-based information from this transition assessment. Otherwise, you're not deriving any goals. There's no way to write goals if the information that comes out of these assessments do not give you skills to work on. It's just like when you're looking for strategies to teach specific skills, you can't go Google, okay, well, today I think I'm going to use backward chaining, which if you go to the evidence-based practice for organizational skills this week, she talks about backwards chaining in relation to high school schedules, and it is amazing. Like the resources that were shared in that session, you guys are going to love that too. But I didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what? When I do this transition assessment thing this morning, I'm going to use backwards chaining. That's how I'm going to teach. That's my plan. That's my strategy. That's not what teachers do. Teachers know the skill first. We know the skill that our students need or the deficits that they have, and then we look for those evidence-based strategies to teach those specific skills. So that's why it's important from the transition assessment data, we have that information so that we're able to make goals. We make instructional decisions, we make program decisions, see how we're still going back to that DCDT fact sheet that I mentioned. Everything I just said is from that fact sheet. I just reworded it in a way that teachers understand how important this part is. So when we get to this specific slide, well, the slide before, when we get to this part tomorrow, we have two very small interest inventories on David and Sierra. And so David is a student that he struggles with reading. He actually doesn't like to read and he doesn't like to write, but he wants to be a lawyer. He sees lawyers on TV. They look really cool because they argue in court. They have power. They seem important. And so it's the job of the person, we're calling them, you're the assessor. It's the assessor's job to determine what it is about the job that David sees appealing. Because does David know that lawyers have to spend a ton of time researching, reading, writing? So those are the things that he said that he didn't like. So what is it about being an attorney that he thinks he will like? And I'm sure that if I did a poll with all of you right now, you have, students with IEPs in your school districts that either want to be doctors or lawyers or NFL or NBA or, all of these dream jobs. But what is it specifically about those jobs that they're drawn to? I'm, 5'6". I'm not playing professional basketball. And, what is it about professional basketball that you like? Okay, the money. Okay, well, let's talk about all the other things that you've got to be able to do before you're even capable. And then the other example that we're going to talk through is Sierra. Sierra is a student that has cognitive and physical limitations, and, wants to be a surgeon. And, we're going to talk through, why is this not a realistic goal for Sierra? And, what are other things that exist that Sierra may be able to do? So I'm going to tell you that within each of the case studies that we do tomorrow, I tried to do examples that no matter what population of student that you teach, you will relate to one of them. So if you teach students, with learning disabilities that are going to go to college and, may be a lawyer, maybe a surgeon. And then you have students that have, mild intellectual disability. And then we have students with more moderate and severe disabilities. So what I tried to do is, no matter the population that the audience tomorrow, all of my examples they work within. So it relates to your students, basically, is how we do the case studies. And the same with the IEP writing. When they're writing the IEP goals, they make sure that they address, different populations of our students so that everyone is relating to what we're doing. Okay, so I'm revisiting this one specifically for our session because I did want to talk through those four just a little bit more. Do you guys use the picture interest career surveys? I know that some of you have to use those within your districts. Well, if you use the ones, there are a lot that are quite dated. And like I had said earlier, there's ones that the pictures are old or may, use things that we just don't use anymore. And so, teachers are making their own picture interest inventory. And so what they've done is they've gone and they've taken pictures of, either offline or, at their specific location, their career mapping that they do within their area, and take pictures of people doing the jobs, or they find pictures of the jobs instead of using the things that are dated and older. And so this is an example that I have that is just something that a teacher made, and the student simply can check it or, pick out within the inventory packet of things that look interesting or they may want to try out. And I think that these are also great examples, but it doesn't stay a formal transition assessment once we start, moving into those areas. And so that was important for me to point out. And then also here's ONED. So I really hope that some of you have used this interest profiler, because it definitely does the things that you need it to do. If you see on the bottom, it says start interest results, job zones, careers at the bottom. These are literally just screenshots from my screen that I put on here for this transition assessment. So there's 60 questions. They're five 5 pages of 12 questions, and there's no way to change how many questions are presented. It literally looks that way. Now you can print the whole thing and have the student do it on paper, and then you see on the left side of my screen, then you can enter the scores in yourself. So you actually skip over the interest part and you go straight to the results. So if you have to do that for a particular population of students, and then when you start this assessment, you can go through talking about what these emojis mean. When the students are filling it out, if I see a whole lot of teeth over here to the far right, that must mean I really like something. If my tongue is stuck out and my eyes turn into X's, I must really hate it. And then, and students are better with emojis because of cell phones and things like that. But, spending time to make sure that the students understand, I like this. And then, so once you get through those 60 questions and it gets to the results portion, it gives you, the green, the pink, the yellow, the purple, orange, and blue, they all filter into, the interest profiler puts you into careers and types. And then when you get to the job zones ask you like specific questions about how much school do you want to do. Because if you did pick out activities that would lead you to the medical field like David, but then you say, oh, I'm not going to school for more than 2 years, or, oh, I'm not going to college after my 4 years, or, oh, I'm not going to college at all, it still keeps you in that same zone. You still get to stay in the medical field, but based on the data that you entered of how much experience you have and how much college you want to do, then it gives you those careers at the end. And so then at the end, when you have those careers, then there's videos for you to watch, and they're not long. The occupational handbook made all of those. And honestly, some of the videos are really, really good, and they're just a couple minutes long. So once you get to that part and you're watching the videos, then the students can, rate the video of, this does look like something I'm interested in, and then go into the different areas. So this is a really great interest inventory. And I'll tell you that I helped a teacher recently, at the end of the school year, create a Google Doc so that if she was doing this ONET online or virtually with a student and she was reading it and they were telling her the answers, then she was able to input that data into a Google Doc with the student's results at the end. And then she went back and went over those results in a way that was student friendly and then parent friendly, kind of like we go back to that, the 9 ideas for assessment and methods for transition assessment, making sure that she was addressing all of those, because with virtual, it does make that component a little harder. Now, students can fill this out. You can email this actual link to students. They can fill it out and they can email you the results right back. So whenever it has, at the very end, the next, where you see the word next, it turns into finished. Then they can either select to email it to themselves or they can enter in your email address. So this could be something that is very easily turned into a virtual component. Anyone else have experience with ONET?
Our community-based training coordinator uses it for the credential kids and for her work-based learning stuff. But I've looked at it and used it a time or two on special cases. They also have an ability one too, and then they can match both.
Now, does she share the data that she gets whenever she does it?
Yes.
Good. That's good. Well, and that's something that when you guys I have a funny slide that we'll go over, but when you're training the teachers, the collaboration piece of like how many people are doing assessments and how can we get our hands on all that data, because, we're gathering all of this information for the same common goal. We all are trying to make the students, outcomes better once they leave us. So sharing the data and the information is so important. The intelligence test is part of, the students are given these tests, and we have, usually they're in some cumulative folder that the student has. They're given to the IEP team whenever they're trying to make determinations and writing down the information for the IQ test and things like that. And this is where See, that was a great leading and guiding question. Y'all didn't even know that I told Ann to say that. That was a great segue. But who else may have the assessment information? Because all of the people that just appeared on your screen have reported at some time that they collect transition assessment data. And they may not call it transition assessment data, but data that we can use to inform a transition plan is collected by all these people: the special ed teacher, the gen ed teacher, our guidance counselors, our VR counselors, career tech ed educators, community rehab folks, our students, post-secondary education disability specialists, school psychologists, social workers, employers, job coaches, transition coordinators, case managers, our parents, assistive technology folks, and then related service. So all of these people at some time, especially during the times where our students are going into, they're leaving 5th grade and moving into 6th grade, or they're leaving 8th grade and they're going into 9th grade. There's a lot of work put into planning out student schedules. There's a lot of time and energy put in to thoughtful transitions. And so the data that, our colleagues are collecting in the area that can inform transition assessment, we need to get our hands on. So this, the next slide is good for teachers to see the importance of collaboration, because are your plates full yet? And that's, this is literally the slide from tomorrow's presentation, because, as a teacher, as an educator, our plates are always full. There's always something else that either we feel like, the state or our district, or, just in general, educators feel like we're always taking on more jobs and given more things to do. And, right now, with the way that things with COVID and, school shutdown and all of those things, like, teachers are feeling like, what else can we possibly put on our plate? What else can we possibly have to do? And so it's a great time when you're doing this training is to appreciate all the things that they do. Appreciate all the things, all the hard work. I mean, schools shut down March 13th, March 14th. I can't remember the exact date, but 2 weeks later, we had teachers logging on with us like almost daily, asking for resources, asking for help. What are ways we can make this virtual? So people work their butts off to make sure our students still got transition services. So your plate may be full, but there's always time for pie. There's always time for dessert. So, finding, that underlying thing that, I used to be a server, and to be honest, that was my sales pitch. When, you said that you didn't have any more room and that you were full from your steak, I would say, well, God created a special place in your stomach that can only be filled with cheesecake. So everyone always has room for cheesecake. And I'm telling you, like, I could sell some cheesecake, but, having these conversations with our teachers and, just going through, like I said, this is a time to be thankful. I mean, that's why I used to Thanksgiving plate, is to remind myself to be thankful to the teachers and to tell them how much hard work they've put into it. And, and also talk about, okay, your plate is full, but how can we utilize other people? How can we utilize other professionals, the collaboration piece? All of these people that are on this screen have done an assessment, and I bet that data will inform some of our work. And even if the data is not an exact transition assessment, I bet there's something from there that I can use, that I can dive deeper into the student. Because, okay, Jennifer looks like she likes to, be in charge, or likes to manage people, or she likes good chairs. And she identifies in this area. So let's look at a different transition assessment. Let's give her a job tryout in this specific area. So then we're taking data and we're building upon it by using our, by collaborating with each other. So the great Cindy Nixon, who I know is on here, this afternoon, she's going to be talking about meaningful IEPs, and she is also a professor at Francis Marion. And I believe that one of her amazing students wrote in there, and I'm totally putting her out there, but wrote in an evaluation recently that she was the bee's knees, or something so cute like that. And so when I was looking for pictures to put in our slides, I thought it would be funny to put something with bees just for you, Cindy.
Thank you very much. That is hysterical.
But like worker bee, it's a funny slide, obviously, but we got to be careful with personality factors, and we have to be careful with personality tests and learning style tests. And I know a lot of times we see a lot of these learning style assessments and personality style that come out, and it seems, like a really great idea to figure out how a student learns and then use that to help write transition components. But we just want to be careful with those and making sure that the information that we get from those are things that we can develop student skills. And so while this slide is supposed to be funny, everybody in the room became a worker bee. You could come up with something very similar if you're not careful with some of the learning style and personality factors that we give for students. So career development measures, these are the ones that, we've spent a lot of time, I know in the trainings of the past, is going through very specific career development measures. And attitudes towards jobs. And guys, there's just so many great examples out there. Like, we could talk about transition assessment for this entire week, and I couldn't get through all the great examples, but you have to figure out what works for your population, your students, your teachers. And it's okay if your high school teacher picks something that she loves and she uses it over and over, because as long as you are connecting the dot to the next teacher and making sure that those other teachers are using other assessment measures and we're able to do that, it's completely fine to have a process. It is fine for the middle school to do certain assessments and the high school to do a certain assessments because they like those, or they get good data, or they're evidence-based practices to get certain information. And there's even evidence-based practices to get information from certain populations. So if you have students with autism, there's a whole set of specific assessments that your teacher may love using for that specific population, but the teacher down the hall would not benefit from some of those same ones. And so, I want to give as many examples as possible to teachers, because I want them to see that they need to do some time exploring these, not making them up. If you want to assess anything in transition, I can get you an assessment. Take 2 minutes and send me an email that says, Jennifer, I really want to assess blank in my students. Help me, and I will find you a research-based intervention. Do not make them. I mean, now there's situations where you should make assessments, but I promise we can help you. Or if we don't already have it on our website, honestly, we can find it for you. And some of this is, as the trainer, you guys, a lot of this stuff that we're going over right now, you already know. And you already know how to use these assessments. My job is to show you how I train the teachers and how I get them involved in this training, because that's what I want you to be able to do and to help others through this community of practice. So one way is the bingo, and then one way is the assessment checklist. So if you downloaded the materials that Mike and I had put into a folder, there was a assessment checklist. I think that's in this folder. The bingo one I haven't added yet, because I'm changing that one a little bit before we go over it tomorrow. But basically, those are ways to get teachers to look at all of it, because you would have to look at something specific. Like, you would have to go to the job search attitude inventory and tell me how many attitudes are in section 1 of this. I mean, it's like very specific, because honestly, job search attitude inventory does not sound fun. That does not sound like something that, the teacher's just going to pull right off the shelf and get to it. But when you get into the actual parts of, how students, their attitudes about specific jobs, or, specific components of the job, well, then you start thinking, okay, wait a minute. Once I get this data on the attitude inventory, that's really going to help me when I get to the on-the-job training and the evaluations that I've done for the trainings. Now, we have a great example on our website that we made for on-the-job evaluation, and I think that I added it in just a couple more slides, actually, but if I didn't, I'll talk through it. We made it for, actually it's in here, I think. Yeah. We made it for students that were going off campus that were learning job skills during their school day, and it was really specific to objective-based work. So if we were sending a student to learn a specific skill, we made that their objective. So then we turned the training evaluation into that specific skill, but also the characteristics of a worker, like on time, punctual, all the things that are important to all jobs, we put that on the inventory as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of training evaluations. There's a lot of on-the-job trainings that, you know, students or that teachers can use with the students. And like I said, there may be really specific ones that, you know, your teachers are using and things like that. Okay, so there was a question, sorry. Florence 4 uses career interest inventory. The teachers like it. All right. We use it. Can you share the Google Doc? Absolutely. Every single thing that I talk about today, I will be more than happy to share or embed in this PowerPoint. That folder that we're going to have for our community of practice, we're just going to keep adding things. And as we're going to come up with a way, our team is going to meet to see like next steps of our community of practice. Like if we build out a part of our website that has resources that we can all add to, that we have access to, that's going to be part of our community of practice. And if it's something that we have created or we need to create, we would love to do that. Melissa said, does anyone know if the assessment the VR counselors used is formal or informal? I do not know which one they use. Does anyone know?
This is Ann again. I thought that they used a formal one because there's some when you go to purchase them, unless you're a VR counselor, you can't give it.
When that's something
But
that
that's been in the past, and I don't know now what they use exactly.
Does it have a specific name, Melissa? Because we can find out. It's probably just called the VR. Yeah, no, I was going to say it's probably, we just call it the VR assessment, but we'll ask. We can find out if that one is considered formal or informal. That's not a problem at all. And it could be that VR counselors across the state use different ones, but we'll find all that out because that's great information too, because we need those. And let's see, it was shared earlier that some districts are identifying different transition assessments for different grade levels. We actually have one of those, Rita, on our website. And our website may be a topic for one of our community of practice because we do have so many amazing things on our website and they are organized, but we just have so many that sometimes we forget about specific components. But we do have 8th grade packet, 9th grade packet, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So I'll make sure that I'm writing this down. I'm making sure that you have access. Actually, I'll probably just add that to our community of practice folder. That way you got, everybody just has access to that. And it is a PDF, so when you print it, you can like write on the different ones, but if there's a specific assessment that you want, because what I did is when we created it, I printed each packet and then I scanned it into a document, so to make it easier for teachers to click and print. But if there's like a specific assessment that you need help with, I'll be glad to help you, if that makes sense. And I'm writing down that website. I think website tutorial, or maybe not tutorial, but Cindy, I think that for our community of practice, just resources on the website might be a great month or part of each monthly discussion. Like, so if we have, you know, self-determination 1 month, then we talk about within our community of practice, what is on the task website that would support that specific topic. Just because there's so much great stuff that it sometimes gets lost in translation. Okay, so now we're moving on to self-determination. So like I said, Dr. Margot Izzo is presenting on evidence-based practices on self-determination on Thursday afternoon. If you or your teachers can go to that session, oh man, there's so many great things. And actually, I have trained on self-determination in South Carolina for the last 6 years. And when I graduated from UNC Charlotte, someone asked me after I defended, they said, what is your dream job? And I said, my dream job is to be a self-determination coach. Like, I would love for it to be my job to just teach kids or teach teachers how to get those advocacy skills. And so through this work, I've been able to do that because, training teachers in all of these components of self-determination is hard. It is really hard to get through the first few lessons of any curricula that talks about disability awareness because no one likes to talk about it. We do not like to talk about what we're not good at. We are so good at bragging on ourselves in high school, especially high school age students, bragging on what we can do well. But the second that it turns to our weaknesses, that's not an easy conversation. So those lessons are hard. What's awesome is when we see students using either curricula or teachers doing the lessons, when we see the change, when you as the educator put the time and energy into self-determination and you see it in students. And I could give you a million examples of this, like just working with students, seeing advocacy and self-determination skills happen. When Margot presents on Thursday, she's going to talk to you about herself. LaDerek Horn, who is a national speaker, who he has an amazing poetry book, things that he does. And if anybody has been to National CEC, he talks about reading down the row. And I've used that example before with students. And so if you ever experience reading down the row, if there are 4 students in front of me and we're reading by paragraph, I'm going to count to the 5th paragraph, because if we're reading down the row, I'm number 5 in the row. So that means I would be the 5th paragraph to read aloud in the class. And therefore, when it gets to the 5th paragraph, I'm going to do one of 2 things. You guys are all thinking it. I'm either going to raise my hand to go to the bathroom so that I can escape reading out loud, or I'm going to punch the kid beside me so that I get thrown out of class before I am embarrassed with reading, because let's all face it, it's way cooler to get kicked out of class for punching somebody than for everybody in the class to know that I can't read those sentences, right? And so he is a person who experienced all of those things while he was a young person, and has been able to, through self-determination and other advocacy avenues, he has been able to train others in how to overcome such obstacles and challenges. And so one thing that Margot had asked that I make tomorrow whenever we're training teachers is, talking to students about preferences and self-determination, and really doing some assessments around the student, not necessarily around a curriculum. And I thought that was some really great advice, because so many times I already have the curriculum in my mind that I want to use to teach a specific skill, but I'm assessing based just on what that curriculum will teach as my self-determination assessment, when I should do self-determination as a whole. So that was some pretty great advice, in my opinion. If you haven't used the transition assessment and goal generator from Oklahoma, I think they still charge, but it's like really, really cheap. I mean, I think it's like, I'm not going to say a price, but it is linked into the other PowerPoint, and it helps you, new teacher. This is a great tool. It helps you look at the assessment and how to generate a goal based on that data. It's a really great tool to invest in new teachers. The AIR self-determination and the ARC self-determination scale, these are ones that, this is an example of the parent version, the student version, and the teacher version, all asking the same questions on self-determination. What does my child versus what do I, and then the student. And this is great to make sure that you have this data in 3 different ways: caregiver, parent, student, and then the teacher. That way you can look to see what the differences are and where there are holes or gaps, and then communicate that with the student first and figure out, okay, so looks like you said that you know how to set goals and you know how to work through the goals. It seems like your parents think that you don't have the ability, and then, your math teacher, blah, blah, blah. And then being able to talk through that with the students and coming up with goals. So if you go to the evidence-based practice session on organizational skills, Debbie is a professor at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and she talks about goal setting as an evidence-based practice for being organized, and how very specifically setting goals not goals for next month or next year, goals for today, goals for this week, and having the students collect data on their own goal setting, setting goals as a class. And so all of those are skills of self-determination that our students need to know, but we're embedding it throughout other things that we're teaching. So excited about all of these resources for our teachers. So those are all examples of formal, and I know that I did not go over every one under the sun, but I did want to make sure that I had mentioned ones that I have either seen people use in our school systems, or I've had, I've helped you with those. Is there any that, like I said, that I didn't mention? And somebody's put Casey Life Skills, and I wrote that one down to make sure that we mentioned, because that is a great assessment with data. But are there others that you guys feel like, okay, so Melissa said, are we going to have a short break soon? So for I didn't build in a break because it is virtual. So if you have to go to the restroom or go get a snack or something, we really didn't build anything in, but I can, just so that we don't miss out on conversations. Probably not a bad idea. Okay, nobody has any other, I got to keep the chat up instead of having to go SCOAS. That is considered informal according to OSIS last year, but I will clarify that, because when we presented on that last year, that was a specific question and we were told informal, but I'm writing that down as a question. All right, where are we at now? There we go, perfect. My screen, the little thing, I try to move it and my whole screen moves. Okay, so why don't we take a break here, since we are moving from formal to informal. That kind of seems like a good place to have a break, where we can stand up and move around, turn your cameras on and dance a little bit or something. Well, and I think that moving around is good for everyone anyway. Okay, so what time is it? It is 10:54, so that will let's do 10 minutes. Think that's okay? So let's come back at 11:05 and we will start with formal transition assessments. Informal. All right, I hope everybody was able to get up and move around just a little bit. We're going to move into our informal assessment, and I will try to move through these examples a little quicker so that we will have some time at the end to talk through anything that we need to make sure that we cover tomorrow, or just notes that you guys have in general for us. And then there will be a 1 hour break from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock so that you can grab lunch before logging back in for Cindy and Joan's session. And it is the same access code, but I'll tell you guys more about that. So the informal assessment data, obviously these are ones that teachers use more regularly with our students because they are in more situations where they are able to do these type of assessments. Tomorrow we will go over examples of these. Oops. We will go over examples of these really specific in, questionnaires and rating scales for the questionnaire and the interview, those type things. I've already got all of those hyperlinked. The one that I wanted to talk about was Esther. Esther is one that has been around for a really long time. And I don't know if people are still using this with specific populations of students, but this is for, they have a version for mild, moderate, and severe disabilities. And you know, it used to be by color. That's how I remembered Esther. There was a salmon version, a lavender version. And so based on which student I was using it with, it would be the color of the paper. But here's an example of Esther 3, which Esther 3 is the students with the more moderate disabilities. This is the form that a caregiver or teacher or parent could fill out. And then Esther S would be the students with the more significant disabilities, the same form. So as you can see, these are made for someone else to fill out for the student, not specifically the student filling out those two. One of the more important things that I think we should spend time teaching teachers how to use direct observation, because direct observation has to be purposeful. If we are just simply watching a student do a task or watching a student work, what data are we collecting? That's literally anecdotal data, or, you know, what is on the job data? What is a job analysis survey? Things like that. So using task analysis is the way to do, or a way, an evidence-based practice way to collect data during direct observation. So this is just a task analysis that was on our website for maintaining a work area. So you have, if you've never developed a task analysis, this is a great training to do with teachers. It's actually a great training to do face-to-face with teachers. You can divide them up into 2 groups and have group A write a task analysis for putting on a shirt, and have group B write a task analysis for putting on a pair of pants. And they can ask you questions as the presenter, and you know, but that's basically what they're doing. And so then bring in an oversized shirt and pair of pants that would fit over your clothes so that you can demonstrate this by following only the directions that are given to you. You're not able to do anything unless it is told. And so that will teach your teachers how to do a task analysis by breaking things down into discrete skills, because a discrete skill can't be broken down any farther. So that's just the basic. And then build upon it from there, because if our students are learning a new job, then they need a task analysis of discrete skills. Then you can change it into a task analysis like the one that is on your screen that becomes more of a checklist eventually. And then the checklist can eventually go away when the student has learned that specific skill for themselves. Okay, the one that's on your screen now is a picture-based task analysis. We were teaching a child how to work at the movie theater, and one of his tasks was to do a restroom check. So in between cleaning the theaters, he would go into the restrooms. And so these are pictures of what he is to do, from getting the key out of the janitor's closet, what he does to make sure no one comes into the restroom, all the way to the last part where he flips the sign back over so that the guests can use that restroom now knowing that it is clean. So obviously this task analysis can be changed into as the student progressed in his job, then he was able to use that as a checklist, etc. But all of these are great examples of task analysis. But the reason that it is so important that we talk about these things is so that we are doing direct observation that is data-based, and making sure that we're collecting data on specific job skills that the students are learning or skill deficits that they have, so that we are able to create goals and write transition plans that address those components. So we have in the chat, Rita says that one of her VR counselors said that she used SCOAS for Beaufort and Jasper school districts as their assessment, and Salissa texts somebody from her county too. So she'll let us know what they say about that. See, we're already building a community of practice where we're sharing. So this makes me so happy. Learning from each other is what this is all about. Okay, so this is when we get to the environmental or situational analysis. And this is a really great resource that I don't think that a lot of people use, is the Job Accommodations Network. It's an amazing website and an amazing resource of things that like job accommodations that students may need. So if we look at an environmental assessment for a specific student, you're looking to see if the environment matches the student's skill and interests, and the environment and the job skills that are needed they meet each other. So for example, we have another example of a student that wants to be a physician, and he has developmental disabilities, he has cognitive limitations, but he does like the medical environment. And so creating job opportunities or, a volunteer situation, he could provide, he could go into these situations and figure out, where it is that he fits in with these specific jobs or that specific staff, and using that assessment appropriately to help him. That's, with that environmental assessment. Now, I have not had very many jobs in my life, but I have helped students find a lot of jobs. Does that mean that I know every accommodation that may be needed for specific jobs? Absolutely not. I know that through my work with Project Search, I know some really awesome job accommodations that can be used in hospital settings, office settings, etc. But that by no means means that I can come up with every accommodation needed for a student. And so that's where the Job Accommodation Network sometimes really is helpful for teachers, because if you have a student who has a visual impairment and they're doing a specific job site, or they're at a specific job site, and there are resources that would help that student be successful, your teachers may not know every single accommodation that's available. So that website has been super helpful in coming up with that. And then the job site analysis survey is good to get our employers and our job coaches, our VR counselors, other folks that are in the community to help us get those filled out, because then we're able to match some places for our students. So then we have this is what we're going to do tomorrow. I realize that 3 hours goes by really fast when you're trying to cover all kinds of information, but I did want to do case studies. It was important to me that we did do some of those for the teacher training tomorrow, and I'll share those with you, the write-up of all of the things that I put in there. But basically, Clarissa is a student that wants to work at Taco Bell. In high school, she really likes to wear uniforms, enjoys being around people, but really has a problem following routine steps, and may not have the physical skills to stand for that long at Taco Bell. But she's had several jobs in the school, and she's able to keep to complete the task when her routine is consistent. And then it walks through some examples for the teacher to do. Tyleek is He's interested in working in an office area. And so this specific example goes through different things that he can learn while he's at the office in high school that will help him, because his ultimate goal is to go into finance when he is in college. And so how, this job opportunity is helping him, come up with valuable information that he may need to work on in the next years. But basically the purpose of my case studies and my purpose of, any of these things that I'm guiding and leading our participants through is to get them to see what skill-based information is needed to help write the post-secondary goals that we're going to later develop for the IEP, and what meaningful information comes from those transition assessments that can be useful in writing those. So has anybody used the Life-Centered Career Education recently?
Yes, we use it in Oconee County.
So we got an email from National CEC Friday that it's the online version is now completely available, I guess, in response to COVID and school shutdowns. And so I'm super interested to see like what this will look like online. Have you guys used it online, or just because I know some of it's been available for a while, but not the full curriculum?
Yes, we use the online version.
Oh, that's awesome. And you like it?
The teachers like it a lot. It's very comprehensive. We used to use it with what we called our STARS student and our TRW transition to the real world. But when the credential came about, that is our kind of higher level STARS students. We don't use it with them as much. We pull a few lessons because those teachers still have access to it. We pull a few lessons here and there to supplement some of the employability education standards. But our transition to the real world students and some of our functional self-contained teachers use it. Probably the TRW, which is the transition to the real world classes at the Career Center, use it the most. Like they use it, their entire curriculum is kind of planned around the competencies within the LCE. They use the assessments, they use the lessons, they use it all. It was really easy to move to online for those teachers because it is all accessible online.
That was really well. And I remember we wrote when I was a doc student, one of our jobs at, it was Instack then, Intact now, but one of our jobs was to help with accommodations in the LCCE curriculum for students with less disabilities and more disabilities, like to make it a range. That was like, literally, it was like one of our jobs is to help them come up with some of those things. So it's really cool. Like I just pulled this as an example, and it's identify appropriate behavior in public places. Well, when you immediately read that objective in your mind, you come up with like a population of student. Oh, well, this is the group of students that need to learn that, not all students. Well, then you go and you look at the role play and you're like, hold on, wait a minute. So a person sitting in front of you at the movie theater is talking. You spill a drink on the floor at the restaurant. The people ahead of you are playing golf or slow. Someone cuts in front of you at the ATM. Like then it becomes like, wait a minute, these skills are appropriate for all students. It's just the way that, the instructional resource that you may use or the evaluation of the student. I mean, it's all very transition.
Some of the teachers will take, for example, that role-playing worksheet that you have there. They'll take that list of questions, and that for like a week's time, that will be one of their openers for the day. Like, I love that. They have like a bell ringer where the students come in and they get their journal, and that might be their question of the day. Is one of these questions off this list, and they're supposed to write in their journal or online if the teacher's using a Google Classroom.
I love that.
They write back, they answer that question and send their answer into the teacher.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like these, I mean, there's so many things that, I mean, honestly, just by reading that objective, I would have canceled out a population of students. But then once I read it, because I mean, my stepson, he went with a group of his friends this past weekend to eat at a restaurant. I don't even know what restaurant it was. And he spilled his drink as soon as he got there accidentally. Well, then she brought him another one and he accidentally spilled that one too. And because of like, you know, she has on gloves and she has on a mask, and like he didn't know how to respond. Like he didn't know if it was appropriate for him to like get down and clean it up, to like get the napkins. Like he felt like, honestly, like he called me and was like, what should I do? Because he felt uncomfortable about like what's appropriate. How should I help her clean this up when if I touch her hand with my, I mean, he has autism. So like, you know, some of his, you know, scenarios and things he has to think through with social stories. So in his mind, he is like completely clueless of like, okay, if I spill my drink, I clean it up. But now I've spilled my drink and there's all these sanitation rules. What should I do? You know, so I really was thinking about these role play behaviors, and I'm like, you know what, this curriculum could be, you know, something that's super helpful for teachers moving into this next phase of COVID. Because if you, like you said, if this can be made more online and you can pull bits and pieces of this, I mean, this was developed by special educators for the Council of Exceptional Children. So, I mean, it is a great resource. Now, how much does it cost online? Do you know? I need to look that up.
I do. We purchase the smaller package, which is like $400 a year. And so it's not terrible, and that is for 10 teacher license.
Oh wow, okay, that's
and
not
200 student license.
Yeah, that's not bad.
No. And then I think that, you know, the more you purchase, the cheaper it gets. We just have the smaller one because that's all we needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I definitely want to look into and I mean, we really got that email Friday, like promoting that all of that stuff was available online, because I mean, I've used this curriculum. It's just, I've never known that, because there's even like videos that are linked into some of the lessons that like help go through some of these. You know, this is a behavior specific lesson, obviously, but
right.
I mean, it spans all different kinds of skills that they teach within the life-centered curriculum.
Right. It's broken down into 3 main areas: daily living skills, employability and occupational skills, and interpersonal/social skills, which also contains self-determination.
Well, and that needs to be something that we probably put in one of our monthly community of practice, and maybe invite one of your teachers to come in and demonstrate for our group, like some, you know what I mean? Like just to help others see like how easy it has been for her to make that online, because that is something that people are asking. So that may be a great resource.
Sure. Just so that you have the technical name right, Jennifer, they did drop one of the C's.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, it used to be life-centered career education. Now it's just LCE, life-centered education.
Oh, man.
I think they didn't want people to assume it was just occupational.
Oh, yeah, that makes
skills.
sense. You're right. Okay, so I will edit that for tomorrow to make sure that I don't say that.
Okay.
But that, you know what, I think I've heard people say LCE, and I just keep throwing in, I mean, it's all, to me, it's been LCCE. So you're right, though. That makes more sense that they're trying to get away from the actual idea that it's just career focused. Okay, I'm making that note. I'll fix it. But, and I mean, we can talk about this as a resource with teachers, and some districts have access to it, you know, things that they're able to do. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so this is, I just put some school performance measures to talk through with teachers to make sure that I call it a transition lens, that we are looking at all data through a transition lens, so that no matter what it is that is happening with our students, or who is administering any type of a test, assessment, etc., as the special ed secondary teacher, I'm looking at it with a transition lens and how I can use the data to impact their IEP. And then, You know, here I think we went over some of these already. We talked about Esther, but talking about how these are transition planning inventories. So the support intensity scale, this is an assessment tool that measures practical support requirements for students. And this is typically used with students with intellectual disabilities. It focuses that what support will that person need to live as independently as possible within their community. There's an interview. It measures support needs in home, living, community, to continue the lifelong learning. And the cool thing that I think, and I don't know that you can tell with the picture that I used here, but it uses data in frequency, amount, and type of support. So you're able to get really specific data and progress monitoring when you're using that support scale. So, you know, they have home living activities and, you know, other things, but that's a really, that support intensity scale is a really great resource. I did put another independent living skills assessment so that our teachers would have examples of different tools. I tried to put as many screenshots for tomorrow as possible, just because it's helpful to see the, like I told y'all earlier, I probably, when I was a classroom teacher in the beginning of my transition assessment, I could tell you what the notebook looked like or the color of the paper, but I wouldn't have known the exact name. And then when we get to this slide, my goal is to say that, you know, while, you know, you don't have to make any assessments as a teacher. If you are trying to make if you are trying to look for something that then we probably have access to it somewhere, and that, you know, we'll be glad to help you find it. But if there is something that the teacher feels like, you know, they want to develop or they want to make themselves, that, you know, obviously, you know, teachers can make them. One of the examples we'll go over is the job tryout example. And then we have like really clear activities where, you know, the opportunities for the students to perform some of the tasks required on the job, if forms need to be filled out, if they need to complete a sample form in the classroom, if in the actual job there's math calculations involved, then the student's going to perform those calculations on paper, or, you know, however in that specific job. The assessor is what we're calling that person. They'll be able to evaluate the student's speed in learning any of the new information, and just talking through the task analysis, the evaluation of the self-evaluation, and then the teacher support of the evaluation, and talking through all of that. We'll go back to the case example of me being a chef and the information collected for me to get that opportunity. This is the example that I was talking about earlier.
Hey,
that we have
Jen.
available on our website.
Hey, Jen.
Yes.
Your PowerPoint is stuck on the LCCE online. So we've not seen anything since then.
Okay. Let's see.
It's not stuck there for me.
All right, so right now I'm
Not stuck there for me either. This is Ann.
Okay, it may just be on my end then. I hear everything, I'm seeing everything, I'm just stuck. So never mind.
Well, at least you can hear, no, at least you can hear us, because that's odd. So right now I am at the job tryout documentation. So can people see that?
Yes.
You might have to go out
Yes.
and then log back in. Sometimes that fixes it.
Yeah, just yeah, we've been logged on for a long time, so it could just be simply the screen sharing or whatever. I've had to do that in long sessions, log out and back in, because I have lost connection with that. That's happened to me. Actually, when we have some of our task meetings, our faces freeze. And so then it's like, you have to log out and back on.
All right, I apologize.
No, don't apologize. So this particular one, or this specific one that I have on there, I literally just, I think it's 6 pages. So I just screenshot components of it, but I had told you earlier that the job description and the training objectives, this is going to be in the job tryout description ahead of time. So when you and the student or the teacher, the student, and the work, the business have these agreements and go through paperwork, it's clearly defined what the simulated job will be for that student, and then what participation and performance they will be evaluated on. Remember, we're looking for those specific skills and information on those specific skills to later goal developed. So you want to make sure that's the data we're collecting. And then the employability attributes, that comes from research of soft skills. And I'm sure a lot of you use skills to pay the bills. That was made by the Department of Labor. If you come to Dr. Parker's session, he's a Clemson professor that's going to be talking about skills for academics. I think his organizational skill, his is social skills and soft skills for academics, is on Thursday also. And he talks about how to use skills to pay the bills. And another component is there are videos for all of the skills to pay the bills. And the videos go along with each of the lessons. Some of them are really, really good. And so that aligns with your attendance, appearance, and punctuality. So, did the student arrive on time and prepared for work? Did they wear their ID badge? So it clearly defines what that means. So if the student doesn't know those soft skills and isn't ready, to show those in a job tryout, then time can be spent on developing skills and writing goals around these specific components of soft skills for that student, because if they don't understand effective communication, they can't be assessed on those specific things until we've taught those. So there's a lot of great uses. This is on our website, and it's actually a Word document, so you can change it up all you want to, copy and paste it. Honestly, you can do whatever you want with it. It's just a place to start so that you aren't having to create every single thing for yourselves. And then the very last case study that I plan to do with our teachers tomorrow is a combination of formal and informal planning. It's data. All the data given are for 2 students that want to be in auto mechanics. And it's very specific skills and very specific things relating to their disability or their abilities, and then using data from both students, and then showing that while both of the students have IEPs, they may have different disabilities. They're informal and formal data that are collected on each of the students. The outcomes look different on how we would write those goals, or how we would use that data to inform practice of the goals, which is something that I think is important, that teachers see that you can have a student who is in one track and a student that's in another track, and you can do the same assessments on them, and the output and the outcomes look different, but the students could have similar goals. And so now what to do with all of this data when you are doing these type trainings with your teachers. Really spend a ton of time on transition assessment, because if they know how to do all of this part well, their IEP development will be better. They will understand the indicator checklist. They will understand why their progress monitoring looks the way that it does. It helps us develop all of these things for our students, but it also helps other agencies provide support for students. And so we go through, these next couple of slides I will spend time on, because this is always super fun, because people, if we talk about the law of 2004, the law does say that appropriate measurable post-secondary goals based on age-appropriate transition assessment related training, education, employment, and where appropriate independent living skills. And so when I say to people transition assessment must address all 3 areas of the post-secondary domains, then they want to go back and cite this law. And that law very clearly is talking about post-secondary goals. Post-secondary goals do not have to be written for independent living skills unless it's appropriate. And so how can you tell someone, and this is why, people were asked to bring some IEPs to look at for their training tomorrow, because we're, especially this afternoon and tomorrow, when we're looking at very specific things on our IEPs, if you put NA for post-secondary goal for independent living, what's your data to support that? And so if you have done a transition assessment in independent living and the student doesn't have a skill deficit to promote an independent living goal, well, you have documented that that assessment was done. And so this specific slide came straight from the website for training. This is the Oversight and Assistance Committee. This is a public document. I just Googled to find the Indicator 13 module that we use on the state website, and it says, let's talk about independent living skills goals. And within this module, it goes very clearly through writing the, if the student has a daily living skill annual goal that's appropriate for the independent post-secondary goal, it goes through all of the things. So if you are training teachers, or if you have, because, you know, this is one of those things where people feel very passionate about the goals. And I mean, I personally have my own opinions about independent living goals, and I have personal experience that will suggest that I needed independent living goals when I was younger, but that doesn't justify an IEP, or doesn't justify a post-secondary goal. The post-secondary goal is justified based on independent living transition assessment data. And so documenting that on the IEP, I'll get back to that slide in a second. But documenting that on the IEP is important, and talking through that with teachers. And your district may very clearly say you have to have an independent living goal with all students, or you have to have transition goals for these particular students. But regardless what the district will tell you, it is clear that you have to do transition assessment in all these areas. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do an independent living transition assessment specifically. It just means that when you're collecting data on the transition categories, either through those measures that we talked through that have independent living components, you just have to have collected data to address whether or not you're having a post-secondary goal, because database decision making is not optional. And as we've seen throughout all of these transition assessments we've talked about today, you know, the skill development to goal, the skill information to goal development is literally the most important component. So today, what we've done this morning is all we've done is the top part of this transition flow chart. And this flow chart's been around for a long time. A lot of us have probably seen it a million times. But, you know, just understanding that what we've done today, like what we've done in these 3 hours, has only talked about this component. And, you know, the things that are so important for teachers to know is all this stuff that we've talked about today informs the rest of the IEP. So to put meaning and meaningful IEPs, you have to spend the time to make sure that you're conducting age-appropriate transition assessments and using that data appropriately. And so this afternoon, you'll get a little bit of a lunch break at 12 o'clock, and then you'll come back at 1 o'clock, and from 1 to 4, you guys will spend the afternoon with Cindy and Joan, and they are going to go through taking that data to write really meaningful IEPs. We put this slide on here so that you know that it's the same passcode. Actually, it's the same room and everything for your Zoom session, but that way you have the information. And I know that it was kind of crazy because this information wasn't sent in the general participants information. So if you were looking at a different schedule, you might have looked, because tomorrow's sessions are named the exact same as today's sessions. It's just today we are specifically trying to work in our community of practice to give you guys all this information, but on top of that, give you things like the trainer tips and the things to help, you know, you train teachers. Now, if you're registered to come to tomorrow's session, really the information will be the same information, just presented in a different way. I know that our PowerPoints have guided notes throughout the entire session, so that as teachers are learning this new information or going through the assessment information, they're taking very purposeful notes throughout that, whereas today's we put a lot of those transition tips and places for you to take your own notes. But if you are registered to come tomorrow and you come with your teachers, just know that it's literally the same information, just presented in a different way. And then this is the only slide that I stole from Enrich and from Joan, just to make sure that when teachers are thinking about their transition assessments, they know where to put that data. And they do a really great job this afternoon of taking the student's big picture idea and then narrow that into the findings for the present level and how to use that narrative section. And so I just put this picture in so that people would see where to write the transition assessment. And then because we don't just have one transition assessment, the add feature allows us to enter them individually so that we can document all the results from all of our assessments to help us with the post-school considerations. Okay, so I did good. I got through that. My goal was 45 minutes but at the end. But so now what I want to do is I want you guys to think through the things that we talked about or that I talked about today, and, you know, things that you guys feel for tomorrow when we do the sessions with the teachers on assessment and on IEP writing. You know, are there specific things that you guys would like for us to make sure that I cover more on a particular area or go in a specific area? Now, the questions that you guys asked about SCOAS, VR, all of those type things, we will try to find out if that's a formal or informal, and we'll try to get that information before tomorrow so we can share that with teachers. And I will change the LCCE to LCE on my PowerPoint. But other than that, what are some things that you guys would suggest?
Jennifer, this is Melissa. I saw one thing that you might want to consider changing, where you are talking about job tryouts.
Mm-hmm.
I like that term myself, and I know that's what VR used to call their work-based learning that they paid for students was job tryouts. But that all changed last year. The Office of CTE and Special Services and VR and everybody kind of came to an agreement about using the same terminology. And it's the terminology that is used in the work-based learning manual from the state.
Okay.
So those are now all referred to as job shadowing.
So even if it's a 1 day, one activity, they're calling it job shadowing?
Yes. There's different, it can be a different length. You know, job shadowing is very,
all right, so what I'm going to do is I'll change that slide, but in the research, that's not how the terminology is. Like a job tryout could be a volunteer activity that a student, you know what I mean? Like it's in the book, The Way to Work by Rich Luking, like the way that he sets it up. So I will change that slide because that will confuse teachers, but then I'll explain it.
And I mean, there are other things too. That's not the only definition in there. You know, in that work-based learning manual from the state, there's job shadowing, there's service learning, there's
mentoring and the
internships, co-ops. There's a lot of different ones.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I will make sure that I make that. Thank you. Yeah, because I don't want to confuse, and I mean, I want obviously the things to be, let's see, independent living and executive order, organizational skills are areas that teachers struggle. You know what? You are right. And we 100% made sure that we address those with our evidence-based practices. So Dr. Parker, Dr. Holzberg, their presentations specifically cover organizational skills, executive functions, and things like that for our students. So we're super excited about all of that. And then the presentation that I just did, the Train the Trainer one, it is not a PowerPoint version in the folder, so I will upload the PowerPoint version. I think it's a PDF, so I will upload the right one. I'll make sure that all of this stuff is in that folder by the end of tomorrow. And then, so if you are attending other parts of the training and you have to fill out these request things for your time served or whatever, that looks different for different people. I'm calling it a folder, but it was the link that was sent that just says presentations and guided notes. That's the folder that I keep talking about. But our team will probably decide on where to store all of the Train the Trainer resources. But for right now, it's just that in the last email that you sent, that you got from Joy, that says presentations, PowerPoints and guided notes or something like that, and you clicked on it, and that's how you could get this PowerPoint. That's where I'm going to put everything for right now. But how you document your time looks different for different people. And so in our frequently asked questions document, we did address that because a lot of people have asked about that. But for the Train the Trainer event today, you guys are going to get an email from me that has like a certificate for participation in today's. The rest of the conference is, you know, all kind of together, whereas today has been separate. We tagged this on to our Summer Institute because we wanted to do this training, but it's kind of separate because we're forming a community of practice. And then I guess we'll send out some kind of like doodle poll or newer way to do that to figure out days and times that work for everybody, because we do want to meet once a month. And once we set that day and time, we probably could just stick to that if it works for everyone, and then come up with a calendar of resources or a calendar of topics that meet everyone's needs.
Jennifer, will you be sharing a list of all of the participants in the community of practice and contact information?
Yes, I already have that. I'll add that to the folder. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we do have people that are joining our community of practice that may not have been able to log on today, but just because of whatever reasons. But I think that we do have, we had 34 people committed to our group for this school year. And I find teachers still don't grasp the fact that if independent living skills is not appropriate, that it still needs to be assessed. Yeah, so you can use a college-bound student as examples for moving into the dorm. Lots of, I mean, how do you know if they know how to access the accessibility center? How do you know if they know how to do the things within their dorm? How do you know that they know how to follow a college schedule and syllabi from college? So Dr. Holzberg does a great job in her organizational skills talking about the need for independent living skills and for students that go to college and what that looks like. I mean, I always use myself as an example because anybody that's known me knows that when I went to college, you could fill out the credit card application and get a free t-shirt, and I got a free t-shirt, and I didn't know what APR was, and I didn't know that, you know, if I went shopping with that credit card, I mean, heck, I only had to pay $15 a month, and I mean, the Gucci belt was $600, so I mean, that felt like a deal to me. I mean, I was 18, and so, you know, I went into pretty significant credit card debt before I was 20 years old. And so like, had I not had, you know, my parents who I could go to and say, hey, this started out at a $15 a month. And now I have to pay, you know, I don't remember, it was insane. $500 was the minimum payment. I just clearly didn't understand financial management, APR, and those type things. And I mean, like, I, you know, graduated from high school in a college prep class. I mean, I took pre-calculus and calculus, like I understood math, but that part of independent living, my parents didn't go over with me budgets and money when it comes to credit cards, or, you know, when you buy a house, this is what you have to have. So independent living skills goes so far beyond where you're going to sleep tomorrow, you know, when you graduate high school. And I always say tomorrow because it's like, okay, so independent living skills is not where you're going to sleep tomorrow, but it's how you're going to pay for that, how you're going to eat, how you're going to get a car, how you're going to do all of those things. And that is not just specific to kids who have functional needs, you know, kids that, you know, and one of the things that were really, when we were planning this conference, one of the things that Cindy and I had talked through was it would be really cool to get someone who works at a local university to come and do a session for us, maybe in the fall or when we can do our conference again. Someone who works at the college who is not a special ed person, they're not a teacher, they're not an administrator, they're not in our, you know, realm of world, but come in and talk about what has to be done for kids to access services at the college level. And then they're hearing it from a disability support specialist, and then it's like, oh wow, that is a lot, because they have to advocate for any accommodation for every single test. So if you're taking a full load, that's 4 or 5 classes a semester. That could be up to 25 tests that you have to advocate for, those paperwork you've got to turn in, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot. it's a lot, and to be organized. And if you have a learning disability or ADHD or any of those, like what strategies are you using with that student in high school to get them to where they can do those skills appropriately in college? Because guess what? Mama and daddy can't help. They can't even talk to your professors. So yeah, I think we got a message that says, I think a list of those scenarios will be helpful to have teachers understand independent. Absolutely. I have a whole thing on independent living that talks about every single component and how to assess for independent living in each of those areas. So I'm making myself a note for the folder for the trainers. And I'm writing down, everyone that is sending chat to me, I'm writing down all of your notes on my list so that I make sure that I go back and address all of these things. And if I don't get it all added or addressed today, I will by tomorrow once we get everything done with the teachers. And I know that we don't have but a few more minutes, but if you think of something this afternoon when you're in Cindy and Joan's session that you think should be addressed in the transition assessment with educators tomorrow, please reach out to me and let us know, because we really just want to prepare teachers and give information that you also would be giving too, because we no, and you don't have to attend tomorrow's session. Tomorrow's session is, honestly, it's the same as today. It's just, we're gonna, it's packaged for people who this is brand new.
Hey, Jennifer, maybe one of our community of practice meetings, we could get somebody from a university.
I love that.
To get on Zoom. So that, I know our disability specialist here at FMU, I think she's staying through November, and she's actually presented at one or two of our transition conferences a while back when we would go to the beach. And she's really good. And I know she'd probably be willing to get on a Zoom meeting and
well,
talk.
what's cool is we could do a recording of the Zoom call with her and ask those questions, and then use that in the future.
Yep, that would be good. And Rebecca would be glad to do that. So I'll reach out to her and see if she'd be willing before she retires to do something with us.
That would be awesome. And then so the references that I'm just going to show quickly are just from the things that I showed today. And then the last resource that I'm going to share with teachers tomorrow, these are 5 really awesome resources. And I did put all of this in the folder last night for our sessions. The first one is an article on evidence-based transition practices. It was written, I don't remember when, but it really helps align VR's work with our work and has some strategies in it. The second one is the Padlet. The Padlet for age-appropriate transition assessment that was developed by INTAC is amazing, and it's broken down by category. And so I had to put it in a Word document and just put the link on that Word document so I could get that to you. The transition terminology, that one is for teachers for tomorrow. Just, some of the education stuff that we say that, sometimes is a foreign language to others. The coordinated set of activities was developed by a university in Oklahoma with how to make sure that your set of activities and transition services are actually coordinated. And then the transition assessment document is different things that are on there that literally it's just compiled into one document. Anne says she contacted asking the assessments that they use. I will email Jennifer with the information so it can be shared. So as soon as she gets back the assessments that they use, I will get that added to our folder. And see, this is the exact purpose of our community of practice, is we can get these resources together quickly. And, in a month from now, if we're heavily focused on something else, then we can get together and do the exact same thing on a specific topic, pull our resources together, put them in a place. And with the positions that you guys have, you're able to get to a lot of teachers quickly. And so then that, helps our students across the state. And of course, you guys know our website. The email address that's up there for all of us, that first email goes to all of us. If you have questions, my email, the Gmail is just the easiest way to get me. It comes straight to my phone. I do have a USC email, so if you email that one, I will get that email too. We're always available for questions. We're really looking forward to the community of practice. I know that this is going to be a lot of sitting this week and a lot of information, but I promise that just like Research to Practice Institute, I always love all the information that I get, and I'm so excited about the resources that we can share. This week, I'm so excited about just, it has a really different feel in how we are targeting the evidence-based practices of specific content area to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our students. And then we're able to pull all that together for our transition. I just really love it. So if you guys have questions, I know that you got 5 minutes and then you get a lunch break. So if you have questions or if we went over something that you want more information, we are always available. So, and then Cindy and Joan will see you back, same exact room, same exact code at 1 o'clock.